We welcome you to today's webinar, Microlearning. It's literally about time. In the spirit of full disclosure, I want to say that the term microlearning has different meanings to different people. Some think of it as being 3 to 5 minute long episodes of learning. We're not using it that way. The sessions that we'll be talking about today often have maybe a duration of 1 hour to a maximum of 4 hours. But just so you'll understand how we're using that term. By way of introduction, let me introduce myself and my colleague, Joe Folkman, who is a recognized psychometrician. And we also have, as part of our hosting team today, 2 of our regional vice presidents. Bruce Wilson has some information and an offer that he will share with you at the end of today's webinar. Bruce?
Yeah, hey, like everyone else, I'm looking forward today to learning more about the micro-learning and micro-sessions. And certainly I'm looking forward to sharing with you a special offer today at the end of our session in another 35, 45 minutes. So looking forward to talking with you then.
Thank you. And Tracy Consolini, another regional vice president, will be handling our chat room. So if you have questions, she'll be doing her best to kind of answer all of those queries. Tracy, just say hi if you would.
Hello, everyone. I look forward to answering any questions and fielding your comments.
All right. So micro-learning, it's all about time. There are probably not a lot of people on the call today who have as much memory as I do, but learning and development, and particularly executive development programs, used to be pretty lengthy. Harvard, Stanford, 13-week-long programs. As time moved on, they became shorter. They were month-long, sometimes week-long programs. I remember a conversation I had once when I was working in the executive programs office at the University of Southern California. I was talking to an executive in a firm, and I was trying to encourage them to send a participant to one of our sessions. It was a month-long session. He said, he kind of bellowed to me over the phone, "Man, if I can spare that person for 4 weeks, I can spare that person." And I got the message that the pace of organizations years ago was slower. And in many ways, corporate development programs often kind of mimicked what had been going on in the academic world. Lots of things have changed. Our world today has changed. Organizations, as we all know, have become leaner. A faster pace is within us all. Luckily, some new technology has emerged to help learning become more efficient. Without question, individuals are being asked to take more responsibility for their learning. Our hybrid work environment, where people are oscillating between working at home and working in a central office somewhere, has just created many, many changes. And so what we want to talk with you about today is some trends that we see happening in learning events, and how particularly micro-learning really fits in that picture. There are lots of ways to categorize these learning events, and I'm offering here kind of 4 ways of thinking about them, realizing that there could be other ways to kind of sort them out. But some are definitely geared toward helping people acquire new attitudes, new perspectives, new mindsets. There are others that are kind of geared toward giving people specific information about a specific topic. There are some that are kind of geared toward helping people acquire a more effective skill, or to modify their behavior to do something new that they haven't typically been doing. And then there's probably a category of events that are basically reinforcing or sustaining what people already know and trying to help them find ways to more effectively kind of pursue that and reinforce that. The events that we're talking about today, specifically in terms of these events, have specific time implications. Imparting information can be done very quickly, just in time. Reinforcement sessions may also be fairly brief. But when you think about helping people change an attitude or acquire some new behavior or to expand the use of that behavior, that takes longer. And so when you heard me say that maybe some sessions might last several hours, obviously this means it gives participants a chance to not only ponder a new behavior, but to also rehearse or practice and reflect on how they're currently applying that skill. So differing objectives do require different time parameters for them. I want to talk with you just briefly about 6 important elements that we think help explain why these micro-learning sessions can be so powerful and what inherently we need to do to make them powerful. And you see those 6 elements kind of listed on your screen: timely, relevant, engaging, efficient, personalized, sticky. Let me just say a word or two about each of those, if I may. Timely is an important one because we all know that learning is most effective when it's closely linked to the event that people are going to be applying it in. So being timely makes the opportunity to have flexibility and brevity, and they can be delivered when people need them. So micro-learning events can excel because of their timeliness. The second thing can be their relevance. Obviously, learning is most effective when people can see what they're learning is really personalized, that it's practical, that it's relevant to their job. And by being narrow and by being focused, that relevance can be clear to them. The third element is that the process is engaging. It isn't a broad kind of shotgun blast. These are laser-focused sessions where there's a short and specific story or a skill that you're going to emphasize. They don't have lengthy talking heads, but they are really there to be efficient and highly engaging. I mentioned efficient. Because of their brevity, these micro-learning sessions are indeed very efficient. You've all heard the old kind of saying about it takes a lot more time to prepare a 5-minute talk than it does to prepare an hour-long talk. If you have to kind of remove redundant ideas or anything that's extraneous to the main message, it takes some thought and takes some time and takes some attention. So the efficiency of these micro-learning sessions is a powerful reason for them being so useful in an overall development process. The next quality is that they are clearly very personalized. One of the important questions involved in any learning experience is, what's in it for me? And micro-learning sessions can be personalized through the use of kind of self-assessments and a variety of feedback mechanisms. But we often in our conversations say, well, don't take this personally. In the case of microlearning, we want you to take it very personally. Learning is a lot more powerful when people are guided to reflect on how it applies to them and how they specifically can use this learning. And the final thing I want to talk about is that it's sticky. We've all heard the statistics about how much of what we learn is forgotten within a matter of hours and certainly days. Obviously, depending on what it was, very little is remembered, or maybe more is remembered. But I read a quotation from somebody recently who said, "It would be wonderful if I could just recall what I was studying last night." The best learning is sticky, in part because it is simple and memorable, and we believe that short bursts of learning are much more apt to be remembered. We can help that being remembered by providing simple models, checklists, job aids, cards that maybe help remind people of what they learned and how they can apply it. So this leads us to just quickly explaining what our approach is to microlearning sessions. We try to incorporate in virtually all of them a self-assessment, where participants can assess their current level of behavior or skill on that given topic. And it prepares them for the content and increases the relevance. The second element is that content is presented very efficiently with examples and stories so people clearly understand it. We create development guides that are designed to make the content sticky and to help the learner organize their thoughts on this subject so that it will be more memorable for them. The fourth element is that the development plans are created as part of the micro session, with encouragement to continue kind of fleshing out the details of the plan after the conclusion of the session. We are very concerned about sustainment. And sustainment plans are created and tools are included in the microlearning session to aid participants in sharing this information with their manager, their colleagues, and their direct reports. And finally, we try to provide suggestions regarding how the organization can take to the maximum the utilization of this new knowledge and this new skill on the part of all the participants. So that's the general philosophy with which we have created these micro-learning sessions. So in the next few minutes, my colleague Joe Folkman will be reviewing 10 of these, 10 of a much larger number that we have worked on and will be creating as time goes on. So I would invite all of you to make a note of those that might have the greatest relevance for your organization. And so Joe, take it away.
Thanks, Jack. And I remember Tracy and I were in Atlanta. We gathered some of our clients together to talk and just give us some feedback about their challenges and what they needed. And I still remember one of the participants when we said, "What would you really like?" And he said, "What I'd like is I'd like a dynamic learning experience that really taught people something they could walk away with, a plan about, but I only want it to last 1 hour." And I remember kind of shaking my head and saying, "Wow, how could we do that?" And that was the challenge. And so Jack and I put our heads to this and we started to do this in a webinar format. And so I'm just going to take you through a few of these and give you a taste for them. The first one I'm going to talk about is leadership speed. Now, several years ago, Jack and I, when we were looking at the data, we looked and we found that the speed at which a leader moved had a real impact on their effectiveness as a leader. In fact, I love this quote by the historian Stephen Kern: "Human beings have never opted for slower." And as you look back several years and think about your life and what's happened, gosh, things just continue to speed up, and things that used to take us a long time are now taking us a short time. And there's a real interesting implication to that speed. Well, as you think about the impact of speed, here's what we noticed. If a leader was below the 75th percentile on their speed, their effectiveness rating was at the 40th percentile. In other words, their overall leadership effectiveness was below average, okay? But if they were in the top quartile on speed, their leadership effectiveness rating was at the 83rd percentile. It more than doubled their effectiveness as a leader. It had a tremendous impact. And I think that's the implication here. Leaders that are speedy will be twice as effective. Now, we have a self-assessment that measures what we call pace, and it also measures a person's preference for quality or quantity. And that's an interesting self-assessment to take because it gives you a sense of your kind of passion or interest in moving fast. As people think about increasing their speed, it's really a funny thing, because the first reaction is that in order to do that, people need to talk faster, run everywhere, eliminate any small talk, or my favorite thing, and I put this here because this is what I tell people: you should be able to do that in 5 minutes. That's oftentimes laughed at here. But their sense about speed is it means they have to move faster and what we found is that's not it. You don't become speedy by kind of increasing, and this isn't frantic activity, but there are these behaviors that help a person move faster. And we found in our research, Jack and I did this research and we wrote this book called Speed. There are 8 behaviors that if you incorporate these behaviors, speed increases. What we'd love to do, or what we've done with this, is use this particular micro-learning session with groups, where we sit down with teams and talk about these 8 behaviors, and they identify the 1 or 2 that's going to help the team move faster. And that can be a really dynamic, really interesting session, but it's also interesting at the individual level. Last year, Jack and I talked to a group of 80 and really helped them think about individually what they could do to increase their speed. Well, it really has to do with these companion behaviors. Another topic that we were very interested in was communicates powerfully. What's interesting about communicating powerfully, if you think about the number 1 skill that was going to be helpful in the pandemic, it was really effective communication. And really people stepped up to that. I mean, we saw that increasing. The other thing that's interesting about communication is we find it is the easiest skill to improve in. And even though it's easy, lots of people don't do it very well. So it has a tremendous payoff because people can increase their effectiveness in it. And here's what we found in our research. This is a study with 97,000 leaders. And you can see as communication increases, the confidence that people have that the goals will be achieved, direct reports confidence increases. And you can see that every increase in communicating powerfully has an impact on the confidence that employees have. Well, there's a self-assessment that goes along with this. And what we find is a lot of people believe their job in communication is just keeping others informed. And while that's helpful, it's not as helpful as powerfully communicating. So we measure people on that difference between, are you an informer or are you a powerful communicator? Once again, what's funny about communication, I remember when people used to get 360 feedback and I'd say, what are you working on? And they say communicating. And I said, so what are you going to do to improve your communication skills? And they'd look at me and they'd say, I'm going to talk more. I think, well, I don't know that's going to help, maybe a little bit, but what can people do to improve their ability to communicate? There's 5 companion behaviors that we found have the really most impact. And in this learning micro-learning event, people will go through and identify the one that they have the greatest passion for, and they have where that could help them improve the most. And so they, in the self-assessment, they evaluate their passion for each of these. And again, they get a development guide to help improve. Another session that I think is critical, and this is the #1 behavior that is differentiating of the 19 competencies that we had. Jack and I found a few years ago that the ability to inspire and motivate others is the #1 differentiating competency, and it has the most tremendous impact. Now, the curious nature of this is that when we look at all the 19 competencies and look at which one is rated the lowest, guess which one it is? You're right. It's inspiring and motivating others. And then we look at the importance ranking and look at which one is among the top 3 in most organizations. And guess what it is? Right, inspires and motivates others. Now, there's 2 ways to inspire people. And one way is to push, right? And that's not really inspiring. That's kind of the push part of it. That's the way to get things done, and you can push people. We generally call that drive for results. I remember when my kids were young, I'd get them up in the morning and I'd want them to feel good about themselves. But 5 minutes before we had to go to school, I'd be standing at the door yelling, "Get in the car!" You know? So we sort of learned that from our parents at an early age. We learn how to push, how to drive hard for results. The other way to get high performance out of people is to pull. And that's a different skill. And what we found is that's inspiring. And when people ask, well, should I stop pushing and start pulling? The answer is no. What we found is that if people do both skills, if they push and pull, that really represents 87% of the leaders in the top 10% do both skills well. They're at the 75th percentile on both. So what's interesting about this is that in our data, we looked at the preference for pushing and pulling and the effectiveness. Here's what we found. If we looked at data from 110,000 leaders, so this is not a small study, we found that 76% of those leaders were rated higher by others on pushing, and only 22% were rated higher on pulling. You know, the vast majority of the population of leaders that we have in our database are good pushers, right? They think that's a really important thing to do, and I agree it is important. But when we looked at that, we found, you know, that the people aren't so good at, they're really good at pushing, but not so good at pulling. And then we asked for their preference. What do you prefer to do? What would you like to do? And we found that the graph flipped, that 62% would prefer to pull rather than push. And the question is, well, how do you do that? How do you inspire people? What does it take to be an inspiring leader? Again, we found these 10 companion behaviors, and we found that these behaviors are the keys to inspiring. It's hard to figure out how to be more inspiring without these companion behaviors, but the companion behaviors give you a path forward. Let me just talk about one of these, setting stretch goals. Now, oftentimes when your boss comes and says, I want you to do something that's really hard, you don't go, oh boy, I couldn't wait for you to ask me that. You go, oh no. But what's interesting about setting stretch goals is the effect it has when people accomplish something difficult. And when people accomplish something difficult, their engagement goes up, their job satisfaction goes up, and their confidence goes up in themselves. You know, what we found is setting stretch goals is a secret key to being an inspiring leader. And there's 9 more ways to do it. And again, what we do is help leaders identify how they can be more inspiring. Another big issue out there is trust. And I think trust right now is fairly low. What's interesting about trust is that if you look at the GDP, the gross domestic product of a country, and you measure the level of trust in the country, you can predict the GDP. If people don't trust each other, then, business slows down, deals don't get done, people are afraid, people fear each other. All these negative events occur because of trust. And we found that trust can really change. We also found in our research that we're really bad at predicting how trusted we are. In fact, we found that other leaders are 3.2 times better. Other people that know us are 3.2 times better at understanding or knowing how trusted we are than we are. We are pretty bad at predicting how well we're trusted, and that can be a real problem. Now, it's interesting what happens when people try to improve trust, but the effect that it has. And Jack and I wrote this article called "What is the Salt and Sugar of Leadership?" And to understand that a little bit, when I was young, I remember sitting at the kitchen table, we're having fresh cantaloupe. And just the smell of that fresh cantaloupe, your mouth is watering, and I was just ready to dig in. And as I'm ready to dig into my cantaloupe, my father said, "Pass the salt." I thought, what? And he said, "You try it. Put on some salt, see how it tastes, what it tastes like." And I did, and I was amazed. Salt really brings out the flavor in a cantaloupe, and it does it in watermelon too. It's kind of a crazy habit. And by the way, people with high blood pressure shouldn't remember this. But what we found with trust is if you put trust with any other competency, and what this graph shows you here is the effect of adding trust to any competency, because it has a significant positive impact, a powerful combination, we call it, on every competency. And this is the effect trust can have. So what can people do to improve trust? We find there's 3 things that influence trust. This is an easy formula. Number 1 thing that you can do is improve positive relationships. People trust people they like. Number 2 is exercise expertise and good judgment. Know your job, do it well, and know what you should do to improve. Number 3, demonstrate consistency. It's about doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. So those are the 3 things that improve trust. Now, let me show you some research we did on these 3 elements. What would happen if you were low on relationships, low on judgment, low on consistency? And that means low is below the 40th percentile. And we found that the level of trust was the 20th percentile. Now, improve consistency to high, and high is the 60th percentile or higher. So it's not real high. It's just a little bit above average. But that takes it to the 32nd percentile. Improve judgment, 36th percentile. But what happens when you improve relationships? It goes to the 52nd percentile. Now, when I first found these 3 elements, I thought that the most important elements there was consistency. I was surprised to find out that the one element that had the most impact was relationships. But as you see what happens as you go through the 3 elements, if all 3 of those elements are high, and by high, I mean above the 60th percentile, so just a little bit above average, trust is at the 80th percentile. So in this webinar, we help people understand how they're doing on these 3 elements. We give them their interest in them and their passion about them and their effectiveness, and then they select one of those 3 elements to improve their trust. Another micro-learning session is around diversity. Diversity has become critical in organizations. It's really important. And let me show you some data that we find very, very compelling. Now, what we're looking at here is we're looking at your effectiveness or leaders' effectiveness at valuing diversity as rated by others. And as you look at the bars there, the first bar is the self-evaluation. So this is how good I think I'm at valuing diversity. The blue bar is the direct reports, and then we have the yellow bar is the peers, and the dark blue bar is the manager. And what you see there is that if people are in the bottom quartile on valuing diversity, they rate themselves at the 42nd percentile. They don't get it. They don't see it. They imagine, and you know, I would say that most managers across America say, hey, it's important as a manager to value everyone and to include everyone and to be a diverse manager, to be a manager that values diversity. But some people don't know that they're not very good at it. And this is why this is such a critical thing. And you can see as people improve, what's again interesting is that not only do the leaders know that they're not good at it, but they also don't understand that they're really pretty good at it. You know, others rate them so much higher. So there's a way for people to improve how they value diversity. And this is a hard one to think about. Well, how do people do it? You know, when people get rid of those blind spots, it has such an impact on the satisfaction of their direct reports with the organization. And you can see as people improve how they value diversity, the satisfaction with the organization goes way up. There's 5 companion behaviors that help a person improve how they value diversity. And these things are automatic and they're quick, and people can walk away with a plan. Every leader can walk away with a plan on what they could do to improve how they value diversity. And here's 5 other interesting webinars or micro-learning sessions that we have. The first one is bold leadership. Actually, this is becoming popular right now because as we break out of this pandemic, people really realize that we need a little more bold leadership. So what does it take to help a leader to be a bold leader? And the other interesting question is, wonder if a leader's already bold. Maybe they're too bold, and is there a way for them to improve? The second one there is strategic thinking. We've got some fascinating data about how a person can improve their ability to think strategically. The interesting data point we found here was that while women tend to be better on 13 of 19 competencies, we actually found that on strategic perspective, they were rated lower, which was a curious case of you know, why that is. But this is a critical thing, and we found ways for people to improve the strategic thinking. A third one there is resilience. Here's the fascinating thing we found about resilience. When we measured resilience, and we've been doing it for 5 years now, what we found was in the pandemic, the resilience of leaders at the top levels of management, they actually went up. So the top level leaders, you know, when the going got tough, they got more resilient. Their resilience went up. What's interesting is it gave them a false cue. They thought, hey, everything's okay, and I'm there. Everybody's feeling good about themselves because the resilience of people lower in the organization went down. And in this, again, this micro-learning session, we give people 5 ways to increase their resilience. This next one is agility. Learning agility, we've all been tested on it during the pandemic. We've had to learn new skills, and we'd have to learn them quickly. We find that there's 4 ways to increase your agility. And the first one starts with being open to learning and listening. And the second thing is the willingness to stretch. The third thing is optimism about you can really change. And some people are pessimistic about that. The last one is self-honesty. You know, some people are not very honest with themselves. They tell themselves lies. They wouldn't lie to others, but they tell themselves big lies. And so those are the four companion behaviors for agility that help people move forward. And the last one is teamwork and collaboration. This is a critical skill. I've heard CEOs say over and over again, you know, I brought this organization together because we were better together than we were apart, but you people keep working individually. You don't share insights. You don't share resources. We're being individualistic. There's a self-assessment there that measures a person's preference for working as an individual versus collaborating with others, and it gives them some insights in how they improve. So those are some of the learning sessions that we have. Jack, let's ask.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. So we would very much like to know what your reaction is to some of these topics. And so just as a matter of curiosity, we would like you to maybe choose the 2 or 3 topics that you think would be of greatest value to your organization. And so if you would please just jump in, weigh in, and kind of indicate where you see the most valuable, the most value in terms of those topics that Joe has briefly described. This again is just for our kind of information about where you see the greatest impact coming for your organization.
Do you have any guess, Jack? What's gonna?
Oh boy! Well, my guess is that we're going to see resilience being pretty high. We're going to see trust. We're going to see inspiring. Those would be, I don't know, we'll see. So we thank you all very much for your weighing in. And let's kind of see the results here.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, inspiring came out very high there. Communicating, trust. Thank you for all kind of pitching in and kind of letting us know what you're thinking of. So I think the time has now arrived where Bruce can kind of tell us about what we're going to offer the participants. I will conclude by just passing on a quote from our esteemed new astronaut, Richard Branson, who just came back from space, who says, "My biggest motivation, just to keep challenging myself. I see life almost like one long university education that I never had. Every day I'm learning something new, and micro-learning sessions can help us all get there." Bruce?
Yep, I'll take it from here. So I wanted to end with 3 important reasons to get started with micro sessions. Now, we have done research that shows, and many of you that join our webinars regularly may have heard this before, but we've done research that show that most leaders begin leading people, step into their first people leadership role at age 27. So question, when do you think they first received their first formal leadership development? Answer, age 46. In other words, there's a 20-year gap between when they first start managing people and leading people before they get some formal leadership development. Now, we all know a lot of bad things can happen in 20 years. They may not make it as a leader. They may turn over people who don't respect their leadership skills. They can develop bad habits. So we know that one of the reasons that formal leadership development doesn't occur in that 20-year gap is limited time, limited budget. And the micro session addresses both of those issues. So question 2, how many executives have a written development plan? How many executives would you guess have a written development plan? And we know that if it's not in writing, it's probably not something you're going to follow up on. So the answer to that, both from our anecdotal and some formal research we've done, is 1 out of 10 leaders. So think about that. The point here is that The micro sessions as a deliverable at the end of each micro session is a written development plan. The participants walk out of those sessions with a development plan. And so the likelihood that they're going to follow up on what they've learned and you're going to see some real behavior change is much greater. Last question. What is one of the largest issues in management? Now, this is really true over the last decade when surveys are done. And the answer to that is direct reports tell us they're not getting enough feedback. In some cases, they feel like they're not getting any feedback. So one of the critical things about the micro sessions, the point about this, is that the micro session, at the end, we direct and encourage the participants to set up a 30-minute meeting with their immediate manager to cover several things. One, what they learned at a high level from the micro session they were in, to share that written development plan we were just talking about, and get some agreement from their immediate manager on how their manager can support their efforts working on that plan over the next 9 to 12 months, because we know that leaders that involve their immediate managers in their development exhibit a much higher percentage of behavior change over the following 9 to 12 months. So, so the importance of that is we're creating that feedback loop that doesn't exist between most leaders and their immediate managers. So this leads us to our special offer. We at Zenger Folkman feel everyone deserves to work for a good boss. And our standard micro-learning sessions, the fee is $7,500. Now that's for up to 40 participants. So in itself, it already somewhat addresses the issues of budgeting and time. But here's our special offer. 1/3 off for $5,000. You can deliver that micro session. And the reason we're doing this is because what we're looking to do is to plug that 20-year gap we were talking about and help enable you to give some formal leadership development to those people who otherwise might not be receiving it. Now, our super special offer is a 2-for-1, where you can get 2 sessions for the price of 1. So you can cover twice as many people with the one particular subject, or you can pick 2 different micro sessions that you want to deliver to the 30 or 40 people of your choice. So that's our special offer for your organization. Now here's our special offer for you. You can win a free book today. At the end of our session today, we're going to launch a survey because we'd like to get your feedback. And there's going to be a drawing of 5 books, The New Extraordinary Leader, which is Jack and Joe's Bible around leadership development with all of their most important research and concepts. The survey will launch when our webinar ends today. If you don't have time to do it right after the survey, the webinar today, you can copy that bit.ly address that you see there and you can access it a little later today. And we'd love to get feedback from you around the special offer on the micro sessions. So having said that, thank you for participating today. Have a great day and have a great week. We look forward to connecting with you in the near future.